Hi, and welcome to the 15-Minute Show. I'm Nika,
I'm Nicole.
and this is the Central Asia, Australia, and New Zealand edition. Our topics today are India's Congress loses votes in an election, bank budgets are declining in India and Australia, and Muslim women are struggling to gain equality in India. Now, before we start, let's go over some background information so we can understand a bit more about our areas that we will be discussing today. Now, let's start with Central Asia. Nicole?
Thanks, Nika. So Central Asia has emerged as one of the world's fastest growing regions, with a population of over 53 million people. Central Asia has an economic growth of 10% per year and a GDP per capita of $900. Because Central Asia's GDP is so low, it is in the category of the world's lowest making income economies. The world's average lifespan is about 70 years, and Central Asia's lifespan is about 76 years. The average salaries in Central Asia is around $35,000. But keep in mind that the salaries can vary greatly due to company, location, industry, experience, and benefits. The mortality rate is under 5 per 1,000 people, while the birth rate is 14,000 people. Now for India's background info. India's population is around 1.2 billion with a growing rate of 1.22% per year. Because of a large population, India does not have many job openings. 36% of the Indian population is living below the poverty line, and 70% of India's population is still living in villages. Their gross domestic product per capita is around $2,000, and India's literacy rate is about 74%. The religions in India are Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. India's birth rate is 21 per 1,000 people, and India's economy is the third largest economy in the world. As for India's people's rights, men are known to have more rights than women, which have increasingly changed over the years. Now for Australia. Their population is around 21 million people, and their average gross domestic product per capita is 41,000. They have a literacy rate of 99%, and as for religions, Australia has Protestants, Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Buddhists, and Muslims within Australia, with Christianity as their main dominant religion. Australia's birth rate of 1 birth per 1,000 population is lower than most countries. Their death rate is 7 deaths per 1,000 people. Now that we've gone over the background info, let's get started on today's topics. Kimberly?
Thanks, Nicole. In India, Congress has lost their votes in the election. The Congress Party lost the race in elections to Samajwadi Party. Congress had only won one of the elections. The Samajwadi Party leader promised to meet all the expectations to vote for him. After the elections, Congress had taken less seats in the parliament than the rest of the parties who had ran. India's government is losing popularity among voters because of delays in passing key legislation, common corruption, and Congress losing the elections. The ruling coalition is losing ground of the opposition coalition. There is a public anger. The government is facing inclining criticism from the opposition parties about inaction in checking inflation and passing economic reforms. The country's stock market is weakening as a result of the decrease in value of rupees.
In the state of Uttar Pradesh, the Congress Party tried to turn away Muslims from the state's two biggest parties. It tried persuading Muslims by offering bribes to get them to vote for the Congress Party. Some of the offers included job quotas to low-caste Muslims. However, the Samajwadi Party won the elections in Uttar Pradesh because many Muslims voted in favor of it instead of voting for the Congress. Muslims went to the Samajwad in search of protection from communal elements. Congress lost all seats in the parliamentary constituency and lost election races in 2 other states. Now, women in India are fighting for their equality. Muslim women organizations in India have been fighting for changes in India, such as making marriages become legally registered, gaining the right to divorce, and property rights. The Indian Constitution granted equal rights to all of their citizens, disregarding their religion. Muslims are governed under the Muslim Personal Law Application Act of 1937. One of India's most influential Muslim groups is the Personal Law Board, which is mostly made up of men and few women, who are making all the decisions for Muslims, although they are not the official representative group of all Muslims, since no one has elected them. This idea of male dominance began when the first prophet was one of the first feminists, and its influence has spread over the years. There are also many Muslim rights groups, like the All India Muslim Women Personal Law Board, have tried to enforce mandatory marriage registration and to gain more rights for wives themselves, but the Personal Law Board has overruled their choices. In Islamic religion, they view men and women as equals, but the Personal Law Board does not.
Muslim women organized in India have been fighting for changes in India, such as making marriages become legally registered, gaining the right to divorce, and property rights. The Indian constitution granted equal rights to all their citizens, disregarding their religions. Muslims are governed under the Muslim Personal Law Application Act of 1937. One of India's most influential Muslim groups is the Personal Law Board, which is mostly made up of men and few women, who are making all of the decisions for Muslims, although they are not the official representative group of all Muslims. Now to Sorme.
The human rights of women are being ignored when a pregnant woman said she was beaten by an officer, so the Human Rights Watch were sent to India to solve the problem of gender-based violence in India. However, the state responds with delayed discrimination against women and disregards the social status of women. While the pregnant beaten-up woman was taken to the hospital, she was not allowed appropriate health care, and her baby was miscarried a few days later. Accused of being a Maoist rebel, a third woman was sexually tortured. However, according to her lawyer, the police only interfered with her medical examinations and prevented her from receiving appropriate medication. There was no investigation attempted even with all the criminal complaints given by the women. More than 14,000 people died due to being tortured in the last decade. The General Secretary, Maulana Nizamuddin, demanded the right of inheritance to Muslim women, including widows, divorcees, and married daughters, so that they may finally get their share in family inheritance and not just with unmarried daughters. A new amendment is going to bring a political advantage to the Samajwadi Party for the parliamentary elections by making a revolutionary change in women's status. Women would be granted a right that brings their status closer to men's status in India.
Now let's talk about how bank budgets are declining in India and Australia. More than 3,000 West Australians do not have adequate access to day-to-day financial products, such as basic banking accounts, car insurance, or even a credit card. More people are relying on family or friends, or turning to fringe credit reports, such as payday lenders who usually charge higher interest rates than banks do. The lack of access to banking services impact people's abilities to pay for basic household items such as electricity, telephones, food, clothing, car-related expenses, rent, education, health, and repayment of other debts. While there are efforts to improve access to bank accounts and efforts to promote low-cost credit reports, there is little movement about delivering affordable insurance products. India's economy has been getting crucial these past few months. India's government has a bearishness about the country's economical future if the reform doesn't happen. India's currency is to fall to 57 rupees to the American dollar, and India's government is recognizing that there is a problem. The external issues amplify the domestic imbalances, but government policies in recent years have significantly worsened those imbalances. Lasting benefits require significant hikes in fuel prices to cut subsides, getting the current account deficits under control, improving local investment, climate, cutting down inflation, and moving forward with reforms. Australia's economy is slowing with its big four banks facing scrutiny from both International Monetary Fund and rating firms such as European financial problems drive up offshore funding costs, just as domestic growth suffers. The Australian lenders would face problems if offshore funding markets were to close, following a Greek exit from the Eurozone, because the big four banks relied on the wholesale markets for around 60% of their funding. The reliance on expensive offshore funding markets made them vulnerable to the turmoil affecting their international peers. Despite the pressure, overall profits were up 5% to 12.6 billion Australian dollars to 12 billion. However, housing credit grew by 5% and businesses lending grew by 1%. The Big Four rarely passes on the entirety of the RBA rate, cut by passing between 0.30% and 0.4% on their headline standing variable home loan rate.
Today, Central Asia has a population of 65 million people, and with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, women began losing their ground as traditional gender stereotypes returned in the newly independent Central Asian republics. Since then, women's rights have improved, but not where the women want it to be. As for the election in India, Congress did badly in the recent state elections. Overall, the State Assembly election results announced that Congress did poorly as expected to. As for India, the Indian banking system has emerged unscathed from the recent crisis, and Australia's budget announcement met expectations and predicted a budget surplus of $1.5 billion for the 2012 to 2013 financial year. As regards to religion, the most common religions are Buddhism and Islam. Central Asia has an economic growth of 10% per year and a GDP per capita of $900. Central Asia's average land is around 76 years with a death rate of 5 per thousand and a birth rate of 14,000 people a year. Thanks for tuning in to 15-Minute News.
We'll see you next week for another segment. Have a good day.